Well, hello and welcome to today's Knox live event. Is a MDiv still worth it? We're really glad that you've joined us today. My name is Matt Till. I am the Director of Communications here at Knox Theological Seminary. We're going to go ahead and get started as our as people are still starting to join us and chime in here together with us here on the webinar. But we're really glad that you've joined us, and we're really glad that you're participating in today's provocative question. Is a MDiv, a Master of Divinity, still worth it? Today, you're going to be hearing from Dr. Robbie Krause. He is the Associate Professor of Systematic Theology here at Knox Theological Seminary. And Robbie's going to be sharing with us in just a moment and helping answer this question. And also today, joining us is Derek Fredrickson. He is our Senior Admissions Advisor. And inevitably, there's always questions about questions regarding the admissions process and other kind of technical things as people are considering a degree program. Derek's going to be here to help join us and answer those questions for us later on in the webinar. But before we begin, I really want to draw your attention to using the Q&A feature here in Zoom on the webinar. And you'll find that at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A function, and feel free to pull that box up. And that's a way that you'll be able to communicate with us and send in your questions. Send in your questions for Robbie, just anything you want to respond to in his talk today. He'd be happy to answer those questions for you as we have time. And of course, anything regarding to Knox, if you've got questions about the seminary or even the admissions process, Derek and myself are also here to help answer those questions for you as well today. So without further ado, we want to go ahead and just jump right into our topic today. And you probably joined us because you're probably fully aware of the issues that are already exist. Is that there's been a steady decline in the attendances or those who are pursuing Master of Divinity degrees. We've been seeing this across other theological schools all across the United States. People are questioning the value of the time and the energy that is spent, and including the money for a Master of Divinity, and the nature and the landscape of church ministry is changing. And so we want to talk about all these issues, and we want to ask ourselves the question, why do we even offer the Master of Divinity degree, and is it still worth it? So, Robbie, solve all of our problems today, would you?
All right. Well, as Matt said, he asked a provocative question, and I thought about giving a provocative answer and to say, no, it's not worth it. And thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you later. But that's obviously not where we're landing. And we do think that the MDiv is still worth it as a degree here at Knox, that we offer it. But let me just explain to you why, or even why I asked the question. I kind of took Matt's question seriously when he asked me to talk on, is the MDiv still worth it as a theological degree? And even asking it that way assumes that it was at one point worth it. And it's worth thinking about is if you grew up in the church, your pastor probably most likely had an MDiv. That is the stable degree of most pastors in the country. And as it's continued, that's the kind of base degree that you would get as a pastor. It's a very respected degree. So the question is now, what about now? And why are we asking about now? What's happening now that would make getting the MDiv no longer worth it? Well, you can probably think about the number of things that are different now. We are living in a pandemic. We're living in a challenging time of lockdowns and changing landscapes and culture and context. There's financial issues that are certainly at stake, and for many of us, in short, we live in a very uncertain world. So students ask, in this uncertain world, why should I give my time and energy to this Master Divinity degree? And again, it's worth thinking about the question itself. There's nothing wrong with saying there's a lot of things you could do with your time and energy and finances. But my answer would be the MDiv may not be worth it if we don't understand the changing times that we're in. So Knox, as a seminary, recognizes that things are not exactly what they used to be. They're not the same as before. So we don't want to offer a degree here at Knox Seminary that's just necessarily the same as usual MDiv. So I want to defend the MDiv here to the question that's been asked, but I don't want to defend necessarily the MDiv everywhere and in all places. We want to defend here that we think Knox's MDiv is uniquely situated to speak to the world in which we live in, where we take timeless biblical truth and try to apply it in this challenging, uncertain world. And so we have tried to design our curriculum and our program in a way that matches those current circumstances, addresses those kinds of things. I think we're really weathered to go through this difficult time of not meeting in person. Knox now has a fully online MDiv, as you're probably aware. So you can take the MDiv, regardless of whether your own city restrictions may not allow you to travel much, that we have the privilege to offer this in a way that you can take classes where you are. We've tried it here at Knox to make this as affordable as possible as a degree, to kind of shrink tuition to its lowest that we can go, and so that you can afford this degree. And we're also focused on equipping you with some of the best resources we can in this new landscape. And part of that is our partnership with Logos digital software and its library. So you might be familiar with that, that Knox students come in, and as part of that partnership, every Knox student has access and receives the Logos software that you're able to use, which is an incredible benefit to your language skills, to opening up the scriptures in its original languages, to having a digital library at your fingertips. So for us, also at Knox, we recognize this is a difficult time, but we also think this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for the church to be equipped to meet these challenging circumstances with people who are informed, knowledgeable about God's word and about the gospel and how to apply it in their circumstance. But as a question, just is the Knox MDiv still worth it? We should answer the question, what is the MDiv? What's the value or worth of the MDiv? Well, the MDiv at Knox is kind of the standard ministry or pastoral degree. You may be familiar with a couple of our other degrees here at Knox, a couple of MAs, and that is our Master of Arts in Classical Christian Studies, which is often focused on teachers and those teaching in a classical Christian education environment. The MA BTS, which is kind of the base level degree for people just wanting to kind of get their feet wet in some Bible and theology training. But the MDiv degree takes the MA BTS degree as kind of the foundation, and then adds some of these practical and pastoral type classes to it. It is meant to be completed in 3 to 5 years. We kind of give that sense of flexibility on that. And you might notice with the 3-year thing, sometimes people will ask me, why should I spend 3 years to prepare for being a pastor? And a good Bible answer to that is Jesus took 3 years with his disciples around Judea and Galilee. So if the Son of God thinks that 3 years is enough time, a good amount of time to spend taking fishermen to help them prepare for preaching the gospel, it's probably a good sense that we should have 3 years to give on that. And we hope that students can often finish in that time. It sometimes takes longer for some. Knox's program is very flexible. It's meant to go in a sense at your own speed. And again, the idea of the MDiv degree is to give you biblical theological knowledge and a pastoral skill set on which that you can build when you go into ministry. We know that we can't teach everything that goes into being a minister, and that much of that Christian ministry is learned kind of in the field itself, but we want to set the foundation for you, prepare you to go into ministry with as best knowledge and resources and equipping that we can. So I thought what I could do here just for a moment is kind of break down how Knox's MDiv looks in terms of the kinds of classes you'll take. So you can see this, and I think Matt's here about to share a screen on our MDiv requirements. And what you'll see with this is the MDiv includes the biblical languages here at Knox, the Old Testament written in Hebrew and the New Testament written in Greek. So we want to set the foundation for that with teaching you those languages, and we do it with Logos itself, which is again a great tool to help you use the languages in your ministry, a way to see what's going on in the original text of Scripture. We also have 15 hours in biblical studies of surveys, understanding the Old and New Testament just in a big picture way, touching on every book. And this is, again, a good start to ministry and preaching, where you can kind of pull back to these Knox classes and kind of ask what again is Ephesians about, what is Second Timothy about, what is the prophet Joel about. And we speak about each of these books and understanding the big picture storyline of the Bible and understanding how to interpret the Bible's text. We also have theological studies. This is your doctrine. So looking at the Bible's doctrine in a topical way, understanding the doctrine of God and of man, of who we are as humanity, who Christ is as the Son of God and the church, the doctrines of salvation and how we are redeemed in Christ, and then how that leads to the end and how Christ wraps up human history. Historical studies as well. We have 6 hours in that just to orient you to church history and what Christians have taught and believed and lived before us. And then you'll see there on your screen the kind of second to last category there for the requirements, the core requirements, which is pastoral studies. And these are studies that are meant to orient you again to pastoral ministry, or if you're not necessarily going to be a full-time pastor, to just Christian ministry generally. We have, as I'll speak in a moment, many Knox students who know that they want to be involved in ministry, though it may not be as a full-time pastor. It could be in campus ministry or chaplaincy, parachurch organizations. But in all of these things, you're probably going to have opportunities to preach and teach. You're probably going to have opportunities to lead and worship and to understand the mission of the church. So that's what these classes are meant to do. And then lastly, we have a section on electives. And we know, again, that each of you have different areas that you want to come in and study. So we have those different classes that can be offered that tailor to your interest in ministry. We've got a church planning class that's very much loved here at Knox for those who want to church plant. We have classes in history, so studying Luther and Calvin and Augustine. We've got more biblical study oriented classes as well. Cultural classes, trying to understand the culture around us and its literature. So this is just, again, the kind of base level, what we want our classes here at Knox to give you as you work through it. All of our classes here at Knox are online, and I'll give you 2 exceptions to that just in a minute, but are meant that can be done in an 8-week term. So that's how many of Knox classes work. So 8 weeks, you can take one of these 3-hour classes. In the case of the languages, those go over a 16-week term. We offer them all year round, which means if you want to go summer, fall, spring, you certainly can. You can take breaks as you need to as well. And then 2 quick classes I'll mention that are kind of unique in Knox program, but fit very well with our vision, which is the supervised internship and the preaching practicum. And the idea of these they're not lecture-based classes where you're watching videos, which is the other classes often do, where you watch recorded videos and readings and write. These classes are meant to be field experience-based, where we're kind of saying we want you to go out, get your feet wet with an internship or be involved in a ministry. And we partner with that ministry. We want to hear about your experiences on that. And the preaching practicum, as you have opportunities to preach, we'll give you evaluation and feedback and guidance about your teaching and preaching. One of the great things about Knox is that many of the professors in the class recordings are the ones who are overseeing your courses now online. We try to include great professor-student interaction so that you can have optional Zoom sessions, even if you're far away. That you can call, you can write, you can have ways to interact with your professor. We actually have a weekly chapel here at Knox that I actually lead as a way to engage our students in worship in a community. So trying to understand, to minimize that distance that people have when you think of distance learning or online learning, to make it as personal and face-to-face as we can. And really all that leads to kind of the vision, again, I want to give you with Knox. One of our other professors calls it the Home Depot model, that you can do it, we can help, which is that we are not trying to be sort of the knowledge guru. There is many different ways that you can learn and read and find things online, but we want to equip you. We want to come alongside you in a way that simply you picking up a book or listening to someone can't do, which is to interact with you, to help you and equip you for the way that you can. We're here to help you and your church. I think many of the traditional models of seminary, so if you're thinking about other seminaries or seminary in general, where you'd have to pick up, maybe move your family, maybe leave your job, completely change your life to go there. And sometimes that means taking you out of a church community that's been mentoring you and fostering your Christian growth. We want you to stay in that community. We want you to be connected to a community and for Knox to come alongside you on that. And certainly we do allow, we want students to come as you can. Derek Frederickson, our admissions advisor, moved here with his wife and has really benefited from the involvement here at the seminary. But we also want to come alongside your church community and equip you with that. And I'll just throw something out there too, as a part of that is, that's why Knox has a church partnership program that's the basis for financial aid and scholarship, a package to help you with the tuition, which is a way for us to partner with your churches in paying for your tuition together. As our president will often say about Knox, that we are trying to be in, with, and for the church, not just as a separate entity from your church, but to connect you with the church, to have that as a part of what you're doing and lead you in that. And, lastly, a question I often get about the MDiv and, is it still worth it, is what can I do with my MDiv? Where do I go with it? And the great thing about the MDiv is the answer is anywhere, just about. The MDiv, and I could give you stories from alumni who have come here to Knox and are serving in so many different kinds of capacities. We obviously have pastors, a lot of local church pastors across the country, pastors around the world whose primary job is to shepherd the flock, to feed and lead the people of God. But we also have missionaries and church planners who are involved in networks of church planning and evangelism. We have a number of Christian educators and professors who go on to get PhDs and other degrees and who teach. My own story is an MDiv and now teaching as well as working in the church. So you can be an educator. I'm involved in Christian education with the MDiv. We have hospital chaplains, a number of students who have gone to work in hospitals who've seen that as their call to minister to those who are dying, to minister to families in that way. We have a number of military chaplains as well, and we can connect you with those if you're interested to coming in Knox. There's a good network there that we can have you be involved with military chaplaincy. Campus ministers, a number of my students recently who are involved in campus ministry at the university level and high school level, using their MDiv to minister to students and to preach and to counsel and to teach and lead Bible studies and discipleship groups. Really, the MDiv is meant to be this really great base for you to work off of. We want to give you practical skills, and those skills can be used in a number of different ways. So again, to kind of return to our original question, is the MDiv still worth it? There's lots of difficulties. It's an uncertain world, but Knox is focused on equipping the church with a biblical ministry for this changing world, taking the timeless truth and the eternality of the gospel and of Christ's work and applying it in our own time. And that's what Knox is trying to do in the best possible way that we can. And we hope we can serve you in that you be interested in our work here at Knox. And I'd certainly welcome any questions you might have on this.
Robbie, thanks so much just for your presentation today and sharing with us, just some of the questions that I have, at least I'd like to start with. But just as a reminder for those of you who are attending, please feel free to use that Q&A function. This is a great time. We'll start taking your questions if you have them. And we'll start sending them their way to Robbie or any of us as they come to mind. But Robbie, what would you say to maybe a pastor or somebody who's a student of scripture now, who's maybe been considering some sort of ministry placement, is feeling a call to ministry, but is questioning the validity of this idea of professional ministry or the professional minister? Is the MDiv for only the professional? Is it for the somebody who just wants to grow more in their faith? Or is the idea, this concept of a professional minister starting to kind of go away, which is also why we see fewer and fewer people taking or pursuing an MDiv? What would you say to that on the idea of the professional minister?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I certainly feel the different sides of that. I think, my own generation or younger generations too, are kind of maybe bristle against the idea of that professional ministry where they want to see everybody involved in ministry in one way or another. And I actually love that collaborative vision. I think there's a lot that's good in that. I still don't think that needs to replace the idea that there is a sense in which we still need full-time called people to dedicate their full work to ministering to others on that. So I still don't think that invalidates the call of pastors and ministers. But to answer your question, the MDiv can serve a number of different ways. If you are not sure, I think that's a lot of times people come in saying, like, I just don't know if I'm called to be. It could be that I will be called to be a pastor or a minister in some way. I think the MDiv is a way to start off and to kind of get your feet wet with that. A lot of what the MDiv is giving you that foundation that's important that can send you off in a number of different avenues. We do have other Knox degrees like the MA, which is kind of the MDiv, but with some of the less classes, and especially the less pastoral and practical classes. So we certainly recommend that one as well. But I think the MDiv gives you that sense of you can use those skills. And I often get students who tell me things like that even afterwards, I took the preaching class, and I may not ever preach after my Knox preaching class, but it's helped me to listen to sermons better. It's helped me to understand communication and then communicating the gospel, even just with the friends on a one-to-one basis. So I think a lot of the skills we try to teach in the MDiv, we don't want to be rigid where it can only be used in one circumstance. That's what Knox is trying to form men and women to be Christians in every area of life, and to learn to communicate the gospel, to understand good Christian doctrine. So I guess my answer would be that certainly the MDiv could be for that kind of person who's still, wanting to get more clarity on the call of God on their life.
Thank you, Robbie, for that. And we have a question here from Phil, and Phil's asking, why are more people kind of pursuing the MA degrees? For example, here at Knox, we have the Master of Arts in Biblical and Theological Studies, and you've already referenced that provides, it's the baseline to the Master of Divinity. So they're pursuing such a degree, but then they're using the electives for languages rather than getting a full MDiv. So maybe you could talk about the differences, like what does the MDiv add on top of the MA BTS? Yeah. And then why do you think more people are pursuing that route over than just diving all the way in on the MDiv?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Phil, for your question. I think, again, it's a good one. And let me just say that we don't necessarily dissuade students from one thing or another. I mean, part of what we want to do at Knox is serve a different number of avenues for you to choose on what you can. So we do have students who simply need to come through the program quicker. The ways in which they're already serving, maybe their denomination doesn't require the MDiv, so they'll do the MA with kind of some of the MDiv electives. That's okay. We're glad to do that. We do think we still have the MDiv because we think those pastoral classes in particular are worth it. And so the difference between the MA BTS, primarily with the MDiv on top of that, is the biblical languages and the pastoral studies classes. And again, you can take some of your electives to do that in the MA BTS, but you're still going to be missing out on some of those unless you kind of go over the amount of time. So the MDiv, we think the biblical languages continue to hold value, that we want to understand God's word in the best possible way we can, with the best riches we can pull from it. And then the pastoral studies, we think it certainly is the case that some people come in with just an incredible gift for preaching already. But for many of us, it needs to be a gift that needs to be honed and skilled. And even Paul tells Timothy to fan the flame of his gift. So gifts that God gives us often need to be sharpened, and we want to do that as much as possible with the MDiv. So why are students doing that? Sometimes it's financial reasons and time reasons. I don't know if I have all the answers to that, but we want people to come and consider those two possibilities. We often have students who will switch to one or the other, who start off with the MA BTS and say, no, I really want to go on and get the MDiv. Or we have those who come in with the MDiv and say, there's just difficult life circumstances that I need to finish earlier. And it is a fairly easy transition. So, I understand that what happens there.
Robbie, another question I think we receive often is the MDiv only for men? Is it for men, or is it also for women? Do we admit women into the program, and do we encourage their participation in the program and place them? Or how does Knox handle this?
Yeah, good question. Well, the first thing to say is Knox is not a church. And so we want to be in, with, and for the church, but we're not an ordaining body. So when you graduate from Knox, you don't get an automatic ordination. You still need to pursue ordination with your denomination or church network or local church. And so what Knox wants to do is to say, we recognize that within evangelicalism here, that there are a number of different views on who comes to the pastoral office, who comes and who is involved in the leadership of churches and ministry. And so we simply say, come. And if your denomination is calling you to do that, then we'll equip you to do that. So Knox allows both men and women in the MDiv program, and they go through the same program. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, again, once you get your MDiv, that you are ordainable or going to be a pastor. We have a number of women who go through the MDiv and don't want to be a pastor. In fact, they think that that's their theological conviction, but they see the MDiv as helpful to leading women's Bible studies and discipleship groups and being a missionary. But it's the same case with men as well. We have a number of men who come in knowing that through the MDiv program, they're not necessarily going to be a full-time ordained pastor, but that they want to be able to serve their church in the best possible way they can. So Knox doesn't make that decision for you. We want simply to equip you to do what we believe God is calling you to do.
I want to go ahead and invite Derek into this conversation as well. And of course, one of the questions is always, how do I afford such a degree? And what are the ways in which we find ways of creatively helping support students if we are in, with, and for the church? What is the way in which we do that? And Robbie, you've already mentioned it, is that we have a church partnership program. And Derek, would you just be able to kind of explain a little bit to us and perhaps point us in a resource to help talk about this a little bit more for us?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of our students avail themselves of the church partnership program to one degree or another. It is our big help. It functions like a matching grant, really. And what we do is we say for up and coming ministers, for those wanting to serve in the church in various capacities, both men and women, is really, we do want to encourage the church being a real vital part of that. And they can supply up to 1/3 of your tuition costs, and then Knox will match up to 1/3. So if they want to support you with 10% of your tuition or 20%, all of those things are fine, but it allows a partnership that can sort of ease the burden off of yourself, ease some of that tuition back to make it feasible for you. We have other options. There's a monthly payment plan where you can split the payments up monthly. That allows you to kind of stagger that out so that you can budget that easier for each month. And we even have what's called a fixed payment plan that allows you to kind of make payments over a longer period of time. Of course, increases are factored into that and things, but we do have a few students who avail themselves of that opportunity because they really feel like they're getting that experience that they need, that training that they need at Knox. And, one of the things that I get asked a lot, and this is important because it's a big deal, is, does Knox take student loans? And it's important to be upfront about our vision for why we don't and why we still operate as a private institution, a theological institution. Number one is we value that theological freedom that we have by continuing to be independent. And number two, we really, really like sending our trained people out. When you get your MDiv, when you get your MABTS, we like sending you into the church, sending you into service debt-free. And so it might feel like a burden on the front end. Well, how am I going to make this work and how am I going to budget? But some of that sort of working through that, partnering with the church, taking these other options are ways to get you to the end of this without that burden of debt, so you can serve freely and joyfully in that next stage of your calling or ministry. So I hope that helps. Those are some of our options that we have. And you can always shoot me an email, admissions@knoxseminary.edu, for any kind of follow-up.
Derek, thanks so much for that. And just for those of you attending the webinar, we'll send you a link that tells you a little bit more about the church partnership program. We'll be sure to get that to you today. at the end of the webinar. Robbie, Greg is asking a question, and I think we see this so often. This actually is even part of my story, actually, as a alum as well of Knox. And so, Greg, I can even speak to this personally, but let's just go ahead and ask Robbie. Greg is working as a full-time youth pastor. And I hear you, brother. Great work, great ministry you're doing. But he's got a young family too. He's limited in time to learn. He's got limited time and space. If he's taking one course for over 8 weeks, what does the time commitment look like? What does that require? And is there a minimum requirement number of courses he has to take per year just to stay in the program? So does he want to draw this program out a little bit? Rob, why don't you speak to that just for a moment?
Yeah, great question, Greg, and bless you for your ministry. We do love having people who are already engaged in ministry too. That's just a great thing that Knox can see, is when you're already doing the work of the Lord and want to further be equipped in that. And my answer to that is, with anything on that, is it's at your pace, and there is not a minimum requirement. We don't force you to take so many classes per year or per term. And Greg, yeah, I mean, I would just say that we have many students who just take one per term. And my first thing on that would be the 8-week term certainly goes faster than you think. So because it's kind of an accelerated program, if you think about a normal semester, you might say in a residential program, which might be 15 weeks or so, it's almost like taking 2 per semester when you take just one of that 8-week term at a time. And that's often a good fit for many people, is that one class per 8 weeks. I haven't done the math. Maybe Matt or Derek could help me out on that, but I don't think it would take forever to do that. And just to continue kind of plodding along like that. We respect that. And that is a path that many students take on that. And we don't want you to neglect family and work, especially when your work is already the church, to come to Knox. One of the great things about the online classes is it doesn't require you to be somewhere at a certain time. So that would be something at a traditional seminary where, like, you've got class from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and that has always got to be spaced out. Many of our Knox students watch our videos at night, maybe after you're done putting the kids down, doing your ministry stuff. You can dedicate a certain amount of time to that. You can do it while you're driving in the car. I have one particular student who tells me that Knox classes is his dishwashing time. So when he washes the dishes, he says he hears me lecture on systematic theology. So that's great, and we love to enter that time on that. So Greg, I would just give you every possible encouragement to get started and to just see the work here at Seminary of being a student as complementing what you're doing. Hopefully not in any sense overtaking what you're doing, but to go through at a pace that would be helpful for you and your family on that. But Matt, I'd love to hear your story as an alum going through that as well.
I never thought about watching lectures while washing the dishes, but I did listen to them often when I was mowing the lawn.
There you go.
So yeah, that was like my lawn mowing time. Yeah. So, Greg, very similar to you. I was actually working full time as a youth pastor in a church. I'm actually in the Chicagoland area. There's actually a couple of great seminaries and Reformed seminaries up here that I was really strongly considering at the time. But man, my family was young. We were having children, and there's no way I'm going to be able to fit in a typical traditional student mold. And so for me, Knox was a huge blessing for me when I stumbled upon Knox. And they're not kidding. We're not kidding when we say flexibility. It is a very flexible program that works with you and your time schedule and your time frame. I even had to take a few months off, and then was able to just reignite, just pick right back up again. I would also just caution you too, at least what I found, Derek, I'd love to hear what you're thinking too, in terms of your experience, because you're working full time as well and being a student. But, I kept trying to push myself to do an additional course. I used to look at the next 8 weeks and go, all right, I'm going to fit 2 of them in. I'm going to fit 2 of them in. And I just never could. Robbie's right. They're very accelerated. They're very fast, but they're very doable within that time period. But I never was able to find the time to fit in one more. And so, but it allowed you to kind of schedule things out. You kind of knew what to expect every time around. And so, this really is a great program. And to stay in my ministry, to stay as a youth pastor, to be preaching for and filling in for my senior pastor, to be ministering in the context of the community that was part of my formation and shaping, they were benefiting immediately from what I was learning at Knox. And then, of course, I was able to apply those tools and that knowledge immediately back into my ministry. Derek, I mean, what's your story like in as you've been working full time and studying with Knox?
Yeah, I mean, I've been residential here, so I've kind of had a hybrid situation. Some of my classes have been in class with some of these professors, but then I've kind of had really a hybrid situation because of my full-time schedule and because of other things, other responsibilities in the church or elsewhere. But it's made it workable for sure. And let me tell you this though, those 8-week courses, they really are condensed. We don't cheap you out. You get about 16 weeks worth of goods within 8 weeks. So make no mistake, we want you to be in the readings. We want you to have, an abundance of time listening to these lectures and things. So, you can count on, 8 to 10 hours of work and reading each week. But that, like Robbie said, you can put that where you need to put it in those places in your schedule that make it work. And so I've found for myself, working full-time, responsibilities to my wife and even extra curricular responsibilities, whether at church or not, I can usually make an 8-week course work pretty smooth. I've taken 2 of them before, and that'll try you. You'll have a real packed schedule, but I've done that too. It'll be packed. And like I said, we don't want to give you less on our online format. So it's going to feel like a decent amount. You're going to be reading and researching and writing at times and watching the lectures. But it's more than doable. Many of our students, many of them are in ministry, working, and have kids and have to have the responsibilities of a marriage even. So it's very doable.
I'll if I can jump in for just a second there, Matt.
Please, Robbie, go ahead.
2 things on that, for Greg and for others listening, is I often tell students that they need a break. So that's part of it too, where it is good for you, for your family, your spiritual health, to have, take off an 8-week and just refresh. And I often see that the academics is better after the refresh. And it's like, I'm ready to get back in after I had some time away from that. And that's certainly, you're not penalized in anything for that as Knox does. It's your pace as you want to go. And then the other thing I would just say too, again, to Greg and those, watching, who are already in ministry, some of the most satisfying times for me as a professor doing these online classes and interacting with you is when I have students write me and say, I was teaching to my high school group Galatians, and we just covered justification by faith in class, and man, it fits so well. And my lecture, helped them to be able to lead other students to understand the great gift that it is to be justified by God's grace, by faith. And that's just great. So don't think that your being in ministry is an obstacle to seminary. It's the best, and we love that. And it can, a lot of times I'll have students organize say teaching times around the class that they're in. So it's like they're in a class on Acts. All right, 10th graders, we're covering Acts this next 8-week term to cover what I'll be learning as well. And it's a great turnaround on that. So we love to have the fact that people are already engaged in ministry and can receive application from it right away.
Well, thanks so much, Robbie and Derek too. And I just for those of you who are chiming in, we're coming to the end of our time. I just want to give you one last opportunity. If you've got another question out there that hasn't been answered yet, or perhaps we haven't covered, this is your moment. Please put that into the Q&A box and we'll get to it just as we're beginning to wind up our time here together. One of the other things too that I think also gets asked, and Derek, I know you and I have had this conversation before. Robbie, I'd like for you to chime in, but Derek as well too, is sometimes Knox is really known for, or kind of gets known for, just practical ministry. Like I'm just a layperson, or I'm a congregant who wants to grow in my faith, and so maybe I'll take that certificate program, or maybe I've got the time and the energy to put into the master's program. Or maybe I'm training to become a pastor, or kind of work my way up in a ministerial role, and so I want to pursue the Master of Divinity. And of course, Robbie, you've also talked about how the MDiv has become very important to other people who serve in other contexts, in other ministry contexts. Two-part question. One, how do we help those students and not make the MDiv feel too pastoral, but rather something that they want to take with them into other contexts? And then number two, do people participate in the MDiv and move on to other academic circles, such as, for example, they want to pursue the PhD program, perhaps at another school, or maybe they want to continue on with a DMin here at Knox. So a two-part question. The first really is, how do we help contextualize the degree? And then secondly, do people go on to other further studies, more academic studies beyond Knox with the MDiv?
Yeah, well, great question. For the first part, then I would say one of the things that's central then for us at Knox, we are Reformed and Protestant, and so one of the things we cherish then is the Protestant view of the priesthood of all believers, and again that no matter lay or ordained, you are representing Christ in your life. Maybe it's just to your kids, maybe it's to your workers. So we think we can take a lot of the skills that are there in many ways, the MDiv is shaped for pastors and for those who are going to lead churches, but there's all those skills, I think, transfer so well to other ways. You can often think of parents to their kids as kind of the first pastors they'll ever see, or maybe your worker, the people, your coworkers, you're basically their pastor because they're not going to come into a church. So it's for you to shepherd them and to give them the gospel and show them who Christ is. So we think that those things are really transferable. We try to make it as flexible. You probably heard that word a lot about Knox, that make the classes as flexible in their application as possible. So the preaching classes can be teaching. They can be all kinds of ways in which we think about preaching. And then, number two, as it relates to those who go on, we do think the MDiv is a great stepping stone degree. It's not necessarily for everybody. I think many people finish the MDiv and they say no more school, and that's okay. But there are many who go on to the MDiv. Derek himself is looking to do that with a PhD and is interested in biblical languages. We have the DMin program here, which we have a number of people go from the MDiv to DMin, trying to strengthen their equipment, being equipped. And the DMin program does that by focusing on those who are already in a long-term ministry and to have a project even that of what you're doing in that ministry. So we've had that. I could actually name students. I have a student right now who's getting a PhD at Baylor University, and we've had others who have gone on. So in fact, we have a Knox professor right now, Dr. Bruce, who does the MACCS, who went from his Knox MDiv to go on to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland to get a theology degree. So we encourage that as students are fit for that and able to do that. And it is a good degree, and not just in theology, but to go on to do a number of different types of work or further training after that.
Well, thank you so much, Robbie. And Derek, thanks so much too for your participation in today's webinar event with us. We do just want to make everyone aware too, I've just put in the link in the chat regarding just the program overview for the Master of Divinity. These links will be sent to you by email if you pre-registered for this event. We're going to be sure to send this over to you so you can research more, learn more about us here at Knox Theological Seminary. I also would like to just invite you all to take 2 minutes, may not even take you that long, just to take our post-event survey. Knox seeks to serve the church. We serve in, with, and for the church. We want to partner with the church, and the church is a broad term, is a broad spectrum of ministry, and we hope to serve in that way. And so we want to continue to offer opportunities like this for you, as whether you're a part of a church, a member of a church, even a pastor of a church, or even in a ministry context that is looking to partner with a seminary that is like-minded. We want to grow in those ways, and we want to continue to help and support you. So your feedback is really important to us. Do these events, are these helpful for you, and are they constructive for you? So if you would just take a minute, 2 minutes max to fill out our quick survey, we would really appreciate that. And again, that link is going to be sent to you by email as well too. We would value your response. Robbie, any last thing you would want us to say, or anything we didn't cover today that you feel like is really important for us? And Derek, I'm going to ask you next as well too.
Maybe one last thing I didn't mention, but is kind of neat. I mean, again, you've heard us say that Knox wants you to remain in the context as you're able to that you're already in with your church and hopefully the relationships you're involved in. But one of the great things about Knox and its distance and online learning is the ability to connect with other believers around the world. And I really do mean around the world. So I'll tell a quick story of when I first got here to Knox in my first online class that I oversaw. And we had an optional Zoom session. We could come on and you could discuss the different lectures and recordings and readings that we were doing. And I set it for a nighttime. So I put my kids down to bed and I was at home and people were jumping on, most of them from their kind of offices or bedrooms and that kind of thing like we are here. But one of my students, and I had forgotten about him, jumps on and the screen comes up and there's these massive skyscrapers back behind him. And suddenly I start seeing trains and cars going by. And it's one of my students who lives in Hong Kong. And I realized that he is on his way to commute to work on the subway there in Hong Kong, the 12 hours or however much difference it is in time zone. And there we are talking about the doctrine of Christ, of who God become flesh in the person of Christ. And he's sitting with people on his right and left there on the subway. And I've got others from Seattle and Minnesota and Georgia. And here we are having a great discussion about how Christians follow the living God in Christ. And it was just a wonderful moment of realizing everybody's being encouraged by the fact that we're in different contexts and we want to encourage one another to follow Christ and to share his gospel. So I hope that as you're involved here at Knox, you get to meet people and that, even it's just meeting them online, but we've had a number of relationships between students that's begun that way, and they'll pray for one another, and maybe even meet them if they move to another. If you move to Hong Kong, I can set you up with Billy Chang. So there you go. But we'd love to have you here at Knox, and I look forward to questions and seeing applications as you have them.
So I do love that about Knox, is that we are not just a Western or even a South Florida community, but we are a growing global community. Derek, any last words or point of advice or ways that you want to support those who are joining us today, or even a quick Knox story?
I can't put it much better than Robbie. I would just say, keep considering us and take advantage of the level of flexibility. Like Robbie said at the beginning, a provocative answer to that question might be, no, it's not worth it. But if you consider your modern context and you consider that we partner with your church, and if you consider that those are needs that the church always needs in every generation, then, I would consider the level of flexibility and things that you can get at Knox. You're not going to get the short end of the stick here. We're going to get you into the readings. We're going to get you into challenging material, and it can be plugged right into the ministry that you're doing. So ministry is not any kind of burden. It's actually where we want to be. We want you to stay put, and we want you to train you, and we want you to be a bigger and better blessing in the serving, the places where you're already serving. So yeah, just take a chance.
Great final words. Thank you, Derek. And Robbie, thank you again, too, just for your time today. And to those of you who joined us, thank you for your time today, for taking time out, whether it be on your lunch break or a little before, depending upon where you're joining us from, or even late at night. We appreciate the time that you've given us, and we'd love to hear from you at Knox, and love to support you and answer any of the questions that you might have for us on an individual basis. Thanks very much, and God bless you, and we hope to speak with you sometime soon.